And welcome back to the Buckle Up Podcast universe with Brandon Rush.
Mama Rush.
And we're happy to have you all here today. We have 11 million viewers and listeners in 35 countries and 380 cities around the world. So we're very excited about that. And we've done 108 episodes. But today we have a very special guest on for our 109th episode. And his name is Bobby Chacón, who is a retired FBI agent who I've had the pleasure of knowing for several years now, who I first worked with on Criminal Minds. He was one of the writers for the episode of Criminal Minds I was in called Ghost. And Bobby has some interesting stories here to tell here today. And Bobby's just a cool guy, man. I see some of the photos that he has back when he was in New York. And I'm just so happy to have him on here. So we're going to have Bobby on here in just a few minutes. And we're welcoming Bobby now. Let's see here. Pause recording, stop recording. Bobby, how's it going, my friend?
Good. How are you?
Doing well, doing well. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Sure. I'm just trying to get my camera right. Let me make sure. Let's see. How do I have here? Video settings. Let's see. It opened up on the wrong camera. It doesn't usually do that.
Okay. No worries.
Let's see. Video receiver children. Okay. General. Oh, let's see. Do it this way because I did. Okay.
If you want, man,
Hey,
you
hold on.
can still...
Can we just wait one more second?
Oh yeah, Bobby, no problem, no problem at all. Sorry about that.
Hey,
I'm recording. Bobby, welcome so much, my friend, to the Buckle Up Podcast universe with Brandon Rush and my mom.
And Mama Rush. How are you today?
Good. How are you?
Doing
So
great.
nice to meet you.
Thank you. Nice meeting you as well. And thank you for being on the show today.
Sure. Anytime.
Okay.
Hey, Bobby, so today is all about you, man. We wanted to get your story out here and learn about you, and we had a lot of questions too. So we'll just let you, I heard one of the podcasts you're in, but for our audience, which we have 11 million in 35 countries and 380 cities worldwide. So I wanted our audience to know you too. So
Sure.
Yeah, Bobby, let's get into your story. Wherever you want to start, my friend.
Sure. Well, I'm going to start at the beginning. So I was born in Long Island, New York. My dad was an NYPD detective sergeant. My mom was a nurse. Grew up on Long Island, typical middle-class suburban upbringing. My dad retired, moved to Florida with the family. I went to Georgia Tech on a nuclear engineering scholarship from the Navy. I was going to be a nuclear submariner. That didn't work out as planned. I ended up getting a bachelor's degree from the University of South Florida in Tampa, and in business administration. And I headed right back up to New York, back home, to go to law school. So I went to law school at Hofstra University School of Law in Long Island. And about halfway through my law school, and I was specializing in labor law because I had worked, when I was getting my bachelor's degree, I had worked for a small government agency called the National Labor Relations Board, or the NLRB. Okay. And we did unfair labor practices. So we investigated things like union management relations. If a group of employees want to start a union, say in a factory, they start talking among themselves because they know the company might fire them for talking about a union. Well, that's completely illegal to fire someone for talking about a union. It's not, you're not allowed to do that against the law. But what they do is they find out who's the main person trying to get the union in, and then they start a campaign of giving them lower performance appraisals and stuff. So they try to make it look like they're not firing them for starting a union, but now they're going to try to build a poor work history on this person and then fire them for the poor work history. It's very, very it's very insidious and nasty. It's a nasty business. And so we used to investigate those. And then we would literally, I remember walking into factories and setting up a voting booth, and then, the union and its attorney would be there, and the company's big time attorney would be there, and the employees would all come up, and there was paper ballots, and they'd stuff them in a box. And at the end, I'd take everybody out, the names off the list. And at the end, I would punch that box open and I'd start counting. And, very tense atmosphere because, once a company goes union, it materially changes their way they have to do business. And so, and for the employees, it's a big deal because it usually splits the workforce. Some people are pro-union, some people are anti-union, and then if the union wins, then how is it going to treat the people that didn't want the union to come in? So it was a really interesting time. I did that for 3 years, before law school, and so when I went to law school, I was majoring in law school in labor law, labor and employment law, and I was fully intending to go back to work for the government as an attorney in labor relations. And about halfway through my law school, the FBI came around recruiting, and I saw it. And my brother at that point had already joined the NYPD, and so I talked to my dad, and I was always kind of drawn to a career in law enforcement anyway, and so I put an application into the FBI. Like I said, about halfway through law school, because I knew it took a long time, and the recruiter tells you, there's like these tests you have to take, and then the longest part is the background investigation that they do.
Okay.
And they do and so I just threw my hat in the ring, and then I went on with my law school and kind of forgot about it and went on with my studies. But then about a couple of months before I was ready to graduate law school, the FBI, I got a letter from the FBI offering me a spot at Quantico.
Really?
In a new agents training class. Yeah. And so, so at that point, my interest also, because I was still drawn to law enforcement, I had already taken the NYPD test because I was toying with the idea of going NYPD like my brother and my father. And my dad convinced me to go with the feds, to go in the FBI. And so in September of 1987, I started Quantico. And, you go down there and there's three main courses in Quantico, 3 main avenues. One's physical fitness, where you're running, jumping, swimming, doing all that kind of stuff. And one is academics, where you're learning the law, search and seizure, and all that stuff. And the other is firearms and defensive tactics, where you're learning to wrestle people to the ground, and you're learning to shoot and all that kind of stuff. So those are the big 3 chunks of places you spend your time in Quantico. And, a couple of months later, I graduated Quantico, and I headed right back up to New York, to the New York office, because the FBI's policy then was you couldn't go back to the FBI field office where you were from. So if you were in St. Louis and you went to Quantico, they were never going to send you back to St. Louis, at least not for your first office, because they didn't want you working where you would run into people you knew, where you might have to wind up investigating people you knew, and things like that. And with the exception of New York was exempted from that policy, because at that point in time, it was the most expensive city to live in the FBI, and they were having agents quit. Agents would kind of be initially assigned to a small office somewhere where there was a much lower cost of living, and and the families were having a much better time. And then in 3 to 5 years, they were transferred to their second office, which was also a routine back then. And they would get their orders to New York, and they'd quit. And the FBI was losing people because they couldn't afford to move to New York, or the wife didn't want to move there, or husband didn't want to move there. And so they made New York an exception. If you were from New York and wanted to go back, you could. Awesome. And so I raised my hand. I wanted to go back to New York. And so I knew where I was going. About halfway through Quantico, you get your orders. It's always a dramatic day. And you get your orders. It's in an envelope. The whole class comes in. You know what's happening that day. Everyone's going to find out where they're going. And when you join the FBI, other than myself, because of that policy and a couple others, you open that envelope, you have no idea where you're going. You could be born and raised in Florida, and you're going to, North Dakota. You just don't know. You just don't know. They have you fill out like a wish list and stuff, but you're going wherever the bureau needs you. That's the way it is. Unless you have a particular skill. Like I remember in my Quantico class, one of my classmates was actually born in South Africa, and he spoke Afrikaans. Really? He spoke the language of South Africa. And so he was sent on a special assignment even before we left Quantico. He disappeared. Really? And we never were told where he went, but we knew he was going to somewhere where they needed that language. They needed an FBI agent who spoke that language. So there are some specific exceptions, but by and large, so they make you come down to the front of the class, and you say, okay, I'm Joe Smith. I'm from Tucson, Arizona, whatever. And then he opens the envelope, and he's going to Anchorage. Like here's a guy born in the desert, and he's going to, so then you see the shock on people's faces, because now the first thing they have to do after we break out of the class is everybody runs over to the phone bank. Remember, no cell phones then. So you run over to the phone bank and you call your significant other saying, we're moving here or we're moving there. And then you start looking up what that city's like. I was not a part of that because there were 5 of us in my class that wanted to go back to New York.
Okay.
So we all knew where we were going. So it was very anticlimactic when we opened our envelopes. Everybody laughed because we knew where we were going.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I got back to New York, and normally the new agent to any FBI field office, you work what's called applicants, which
Okay.
are you're doing background investigations for people like us that are coming into the FBI
Okay.
or federal appointees. They get very busy, like when a new administration comes in and there's a whole slew of new appointees, you know, cabinet secretaries and undersecretaries. The FBI does all those background investigations. And so it's kind of busy work. It's like, it's not really, you know, exciting. You have to call people and say, what do you know about this person? Have they always seemed loyal to the United States and that kind of stuff, you know?
Oh.
But it's a good way to hone your interview skills because you do a lot of interviews and you talk to a lot of people. So that was normally, but everybody wanted to avoid that because you get stuck on that for a year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever. And no one really wants to do background investigations because you're not arresting anyone and you come to the FBI to lock up bad guys or follow spies around or whatever. And so, so I did, you know, being a typical New Yorker, I kind of started putting the feelers out once I got my orders. The second half of Quantico, I started like putting feelers out, and I found an instructor at Quantico who taught field office administration, and it was like he was he taught paperwork, but he was a former New York agent. And I went into his office one day and I said, "Hey, look, do you know anybody in New York? You worked there a long time, and you know, I don't want to work applicants. Can you get me, like, when I get first assigned to New York, can I get on some juicy squad or whatever?" And he's like, "Yeah." And he's like, you know, that's the kind of thing. You work your angle, you know. And you know, he goes, "All right, kid, let me pick up." And he picks up the phone. I'm sitting there, and he calls up. And he goes, "Hey, Jules, I got this guy. He's from Long Island." You know, and so what happened was he arranged for me to be assigned directly to an organized crime squad.
Really?
The Lucchese family. So the mafia in New York City. There's 5 ruling families. Other cities only have 1 ruling mafia family.
Okay.
In each city, right? But New York City was so big it had 5 families, and so we had 1 FBI squad for each family. So I was assigned to what we call C-17, which was the Lucchese organized crime family.
Okay.
And we were actually out, which helped even more. So the main office in New York City is in Manhattan, and then there are smaller satellite offices, what we call resident agencies or RAs. Okay. And there was one in Brooklyn, out in Brooklyn, Queens, because New York is so massive, you know, that satellite office is bigger than most FBI field offices.
Okay.
Because there were 100 agents there. So I was assigned to the Lucchese organized crime squad. They were the traditional mafia, one of the traditional mafia families. We sat right next to the Gambino squad, which was John Gotti. That was John Gotti's squad. And at that time, that's what everybody was talking about. That was the Gotti era. So when I got there in '87, Gotti had already been arrested, got out, he got acquitted in state court. And so that squad was really the marquee squad. But my squad was the squad, if you ever saw the movie Goodfellas.
Oh, yeah, I love that.
So that was my family. That was the Lucchese family.
Oh, wow,
so
really?
Yeah. Ray Liotta played a guy named Henry Hill in that movie. So Henry was an informant. By the time I got there, Henry had already been arrested. So at the end of the movie, he gets arrested. But then they had Henry wear a wire and go out. That part of you don't see in the movie. So when I got there, Henry was working for us.
Oh, wow.
They had already done what you saw in the movie, but the movie was being written.
Really?
While I was there. Yeah, Scorsese's assistants would come by and they'd get access to certain files and we'd have to redact certain information. So what you see in that movie is kind of what I did. That's the family that I worked. Now, Henry Hill's name was the only name they used for real. They changed a lot. Paulie Vario, who was played by
Mia Sorvino's dad, right?
Sorvino.
I know her name's Sorvino. I don't know dad's name.
Yeah, Sorvino. That's his name. He actually passed away last year or something.
Great.
Ironically, I met him years later. He played a killer on Criminal Minds when I was writing on Criminal Minds. He was one of our killers.
Awesome.
Yeah. Paul Sorvino. And so Paul Sorvino played Paulie Vario, who really wasn't. There was no guy named Paulie Vario. That was Vic Amuso. That was our boss at the time. And Anthony Gaspipe Queso was the underboss. So, you know, I walk in day one, and remember, this is '87, so there's no cell phones, there's no computers. Yeah. I mean, it's just typewriters on a desk, and every desk had a reel-to-reel machine, like, you know, with the big, you know, because every morning because working the mafia, it's constant wiretaps. It's constant wiretaps. Unlike other violations, you're always on wiretaps. And so every morning you have to take a turn. You get a reel that was recorded the night before, and you put it on the reel-to-reel machine because we didn't have digital recording back then. And you put a set of headphones on, and you start making
notes,
transcript changes and notes, and stuff. And you had a foot pedal that would rewind it because, like, with audio, you to say something when you're listening. What did he say? What did he say? So you have a foot pedal that would kind of go back like 3 or 5 seconds, depending on how you hit it. And you'd listen over and over and over and over to it and you try to get it right. But it was cool because, this was, I'm Italian-American. Both my grandmothers were born in Italy. And, it was what you saw, The Godfather. You get raised watching The Godfather and stuff. And so I was doing wiretaps. I was doing, meeting informants, following mobsters around New York City, which was great. It was exactly what I was hoping to do. And so that was a lot of fun. Occasionally I get to do what's called a cameo, which is so undercovers. You have main undercovers who are guys that are in long term undercover, but you work with them, and then occasionally you have to have guys that come in just like for whatever reason, a very specific short term reason. We call those cameo roles. And so you would meet, the main undercover. You'd get your script and you get like why they need to meet you. Maybe they have to bring in somebody from the outside, and you get to kind of inject yourself for like a day. Maybe one day, and they never see you again. But you'd play a particular role in that day. You'd play the guy's cousin or whatever. And so
Bobby,
I got to do.
Bobby, one question for you. Would that be like that movie with Johnny Depp where he has a guy that has that casino down in Florida? Would that be exactly what you're talking about?
Yeah. That was Donnie Brasco. That was Joe Pistone. That was the real name of the agent, Donnie Brasco. And then Donnie Brasco was his undercover name. And then that was the King's Court, the gambling thing in Florida. It was called the King's Court. Yeah. Okay. And that was a complete undercover operation. And so it was the FBI running a casino that the mob thought it was theirs. And so they came in and tried to strong arm and stuff. And so like the dealers in there were FBI agents. And
so that's like a cameo in a way.
Yeah. You're not like the main guy dealing face to face with them, but you're like one of the window dressing. You're like a background or an extra. Okay. A background actor or an extra. You know what I mean? So you're not like So on set you have all these different roles. Yeah. And so these would be like non-speaking, day players, kind of thing. You know what I mean? Okay. And you get to do that. And it's cool because you get to do that. Now they keep track of it because they don't want you,
to mess up. Yeah, I didn't think about that. Bob.
Yeah. So they very carefully, and there was a whole unit called Stagehand that kind of manages the undercover program. Really? And they make sure, and they run out. They're the ones that create your fake background, fake social security number, fake criminal history if you want one. They create all that, and so if you and they give you a work history, and they have a bank of phones. So if you say, "Oh, I work at this place," and then later on they call that number, they know, that number is supposed to be XYZ Corporation, and Joey No Nuts actually works here. So they answer the phone and say, "Oh, XYZ," and they go, "Hey, do you get a guy named Joey to work there?" He goes, "Well, we're not allowed to, confirm personnel records, but if you have a name, well, here's his name. Okay, I'll put you through to his extension," and then it would go obviously to voicemail. But it would if they were checking up on the phone number that you gave them, it would come back to a real number, and the people at Stagehand would actually know to answer the phone, and it would be like up on the board. Okay, this number is XYZ. This one's Acme Printing, whatever. So they're the people that kind of what we call backstop you. Backstopping is all of your identification, work history, criminal history, family history, all of that stuff is called backstopping. In the Stagehand is the unit that handles all that. So we got to learn a lot about all that stuff. It was really cool. And the problem that I ran into is I was young and single and living and working in New York. Just wanted a little more action. And so about a couple of years into that, and when I mean action, I mean I wanted to arrest more people. The mob stuff was cool. It was great. But you work 2, 3, 4 years before you ever get your hands on somebody. So then word came around they were starting a new squad aimed at what they were calling non-traditional organized crime, which at that point in time in New York City meant Asian gangs and on my side Jamaican posses, Jamaican street gangs. And so in 1989 I transferred 89 I transferred to this new squad. And I started working Jamaican drug gangs, or they're called Jamaican posses.
Okay.
And I did that for the next 10 years. And that was a lot. That was busy. It was high risk. It was a lot of high risk arrests, a lot of warrants, a lot of kicking indoors. We were task force with the NYPD. I was working with some detectives that knew my brother and had worked with my brother in uniform. And so I got along really well with the cops because they knew my dad was a cop, my brother's a cop. And so I had that in. And so, yeah, then I started kicking indoors and taking names. And then me and my partner, he was an NYPD detective, and we became known as like the Jamaican posse busters. And I became an expert in it. And I was, flown to Jamaica, went to England. I testified before Parliament in Canada when they were doing their RICO statute. And a woman wrote a book about us called Born for Dead.
Born for Dead, Bobby?
Born for Dead, yeah. That's kind of a Jamaican phrase. Okay. And she's a anthropologist, and she wrote a book. It's basically chronicling, the history of Jamaican posses. And so just a short primer, the Jamaican posses in Miami and New York is where they were most prevalent. And they are all associated with a particular neighborhood in Kingston, Jamaica.
Really?
So Kingston's the capital. It's not anywhere you'd go on vacation. It's not Ocho Rios. It's not one of the places people normally go. And it's got really violent ghettos that in there where all these gangs kind of grow up. And I've never seen anything like it until I moved to Rio de Janeiro after I retired and saw the favelas of Rio in Brazil. But these neighborhoods in Kingston are very separated from each other. I mean, they're adjacent to each other, but they're like armed camps, and the gangs control each of the different neighborhoods. And then the gangs export, they're a smaller group of gangs to New York or Miami, usually. And then they take the name. So like the Gullyman posse that I was investigating, that was my first one in New York, in Brooklyn. They were from the Gully. The Gully is the neighborhood in Kingston where they're all from. And it's interesting because they also had like a two-party system like us. So they had the Jamaican Labor Party, the JLP, which was their left-wing leaning Democrats, and then the People's National Party, which was more the Republican kind of, or the right-wing kind of, the PNP. So you were either JLP or you were PNP. Okay. And then in the elections, when a new prime minister was elected in Jamaica, the gangs that supported that particular party kind of flourished. They got all the government contracts. They got all the money. It was all
racket.
Corruption. Yeah, but so there was a campaign like Guns for Votes. Like they would shoot it out. We always saw a huge increase in violence in Jamaica surrounding their elections. Really? And we also saw it in New York. We saw an increase in violence, PNP gangs striking out at JLP gangs, even in Brooklyn, because of an upcoming election.
Wow.
Because it was really important for them to get their candidate in because that's where the money would flow and stuff. And so it was funny because years later, I took down another major posse in Brooklyn. And when I did one of the search warrants, we did 30 search warrants. And when I did one of the search warrants, we found members of our gangs with the prime minister before he had been elected. Yeah, with guns on the table and cocaine on the table and stuff. And and we were prosecuting the case in the Eastern District of New York, which is in Brooklyn, and U.S. Attorney's Office. So we brought all the evidence over there. But word got out, and before long, I got a call from my boss saying the State Department called, and I was to be on a plane like the next day to fly down to Kingston. Yeah. The U.S. ambassador in Kingston wanted to meet with me and see these photographs that they heard about. Really? And they said, make sure you bring the photographs. So the U.S. Attorney's Office said, well, you can bring them, but you're bringing the originals. You're bringing copies. And so they made copies for me and stuff.
Who wanted to see, excuse me, who wanted to see those photographs? You said
the U.S. ambassador
in
Kingston, Jamaica, because
okay.
The State Department is very different than the FBI in that, and it was right around the time, if you remember, the president of Panama, Noriega, had been indicted by DEA. Okay. And so it was the first time ever that we indicted the sitting leader of another country for drug charges, right? So, and then the DEA went down and extradited him, and it was made a big deal. And, I think the Jamaicans were worried about the same thing. And so the State Department doesn't care as much about what we care about. They care about relations. They're all about relations. They're about, let's keep everything hunky-dory with our host nations and stuff. So I walked into the meeting with the ambassador. I'm a very young FBI agent, and he's looking in his DCM, we call Deputy Chief of Mission, which is the assistant ambassador, is looking, and this is before digital cameras, right? So he's like, well, he could be superimposed. Maybe that's not really him. I'm like, okay, whatever. You guys asked me here. This is what we have. We're going to allege this. And then they wanted, like, are you going to indict the prime minister? I'm like, that's not up to me. That's up to the U.S. attorney. And he's a big shot. He's a presidential appointee sitting up in Brooklyn. You can talk to him about that. So, so it was an interesting time. And also, like, a lot of this was late 80s, early 90s, a lot of the old time Jamaican gang members there in Brooklyn and in Miami were older guys in their 30s and 40s, and they had kind of been raised in the 1970s in Jamaica. What was happening in the 1970s in Jamaica was the Jamaicans were going over to Cuba and being trained in guerrilla warfare, because the plan was for the communists to take over Jamaica just like it took over Cuba. And they were training all of these guys in warfare, giving them AK-47s and teaching them guerrilla tactics and how to take over villages and kill people and stuff. So that was the plan. The plan was to use a small army of Jamaican guys to take over Jamaica and make it communist. It failed, obviously, but now these guys were all trained in how to kill people, had nothing to do. So they became muscle for drug gangs. So they found themselves on the streets of Brooklyn, and they've been trained by the Cubans to be mercenaries and to be operators and to kill people. And so those are the guys we were going up against in Brooklyn in the late 80s and the early 90s. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I'm going to ask a question at this point, because at what point, because of course you stood out when you were in Jamaica, when did it become scary? I mean, at one point something might have happened or triggered something tell me that process within what you were doing.
Bobby, I'm loving all this, man. I'm so hooked.
Hooked on what you're saying, but I have to ask, as Mama Rush, I have to ask within this process.
Well, I was never really, when I went to Jamaica, I was with a very substantial, what we call force protection unit. They made sure I was protected. If I got hurt down there, they knew it would be an international incident. So both the State Department and the Jamaican police kind of surrounded me with the best of their best. And we really didn't go, even the Jamaican police. I remember riding in the back of one of their Jeeps with a 50 caliber mounted in the back. And they would ride down these roads, these dirt roads, and these kind of shanty towns were all, and they would look up the streets, and I would see guys kind of stepping out and stepping back into these corrugated little huts with you could see them with the AK-47s, and the police go, "Oh, we don't go up in there. We don't go up in there. We don't go up in there." The gangs control that area. And so like we never really went into places that were like that they would shoot back at us. They watched us go by and made sure we weren't coming in there. And so really where I was most fearful was back in Brooklyn. And every door we went through, because we were doing sometimes 2-3 search warrants a week. And you're sitting outside, you're in a hallway, in a dark hallway, in an apartment, apartment 6. We have a warrant for this place. We know there's cocaine in there and crack, and they're cooking in there. And our informants have been in there, and they've told us all about it. But we don't know what's in this apartment across the hall. And we're, it's maybe 5 or 6 flights up. There's no elevator, and you're carrying a 75-pound battering ram and a shield, and everybody takes turns. And you get up there, and you're huffing and puffing, and you're right outside that door, and one guy's ready to start swinging. Knock at that door, and that's where you kind of go, man, I hope they don't start shooting back at us this time. And that was the fear, because a friend of mine in DEA, he had gotten shot in the face like the year before, and they were clearing an apartment, and everybody thought it was clear, and there was a hallway closet, and he had thought it was cleared, and then he said, "Hey, did anyone clear?" And he opened it, and the guy shot him right in the chin. Sorry, I take that. The guy shot him here in the chest. But he had one of the ballistic vests that had a insert. We used to have ceramic inserts. So it not only had the Kevlar, but it had in your high impact area, Kevlar was all around. In the highest impact area to protect your heart was a thick ceramic plate, which was very thick and heavy. But the problem was the bullet hit that, and it shattered and went up into his chin, and basically like he had to have a bunch of plastic surgery in his chin and stuff. So so that was where I was most concerned. But it was also where you wanted to be. Kicking in doors and taking down bad guys is where I wanted to be at that time in my life, and we were doing a lot of that. remember, this is late 80s, early 90s. New York City is out of control. I think we had 23 or 2,400 homicides in 1990. And that was a record. And I think that record still stands. It's the most in a single year. There were 8 homicides a day average in New York City. And so we were really busy. I had gang members killing other gang members constantly all the time. I had one case where I was able to convince one of my informants who came into the office one day, this is typical, and says, I want to complain about this drug gang in my neighborhood. They've taken over. It's terrible, blah, blah, blah. And he tells me all these details. And me and my partner are taking all these notes. He leaves. We corroborate him. And we don't know he's telling the truth. Yeah. So we go out there. We do surveillance. We run some checks and stuff. And sure enough, most of what he's saying is right on. So we invited, we talked to him again and stuff. And he has great information. You know, at some point we realized this guy is part of this gang. And there's there's just an internal gang war going on. He was actually a former cop in Jamaica who got thrown off the force for killing people, taking money. And then so he ran to Brooklyn and he became like part of this gang. And him and his 3 brothers, really, there were 4 of them, but one was just a reggae musician, but he was part of the gang. So these 4 brothers decided to kind of branch away and try to take over the gang from the current gang leadership. So this internal gang war going on. And you know, he thought he'd enlist the help of us. He thought he was playing us, you know. Yeah. And then
he was working both sides.
He was fighting. He was fighting them, and he thought we were going to be his backup. You know.
Yeah.
So I knew it, but we were okay with letting him believe that we didn't for a while, and then you know, as it would be, one of his brothers got arrested by the city for homicide. One of his oldest brother, and he was a real heavy guy. He was a tough guy. He was in state custody pending a murder charge. And so it was him and his 3 brothers, the youngest of which was really just a reggae musician. He really wasn't a tough guy. So it was these 2 guys. It was the former cop and his brother. And now there's only 2 of them really. And so they're desperate. And I get a call from him one night going, yeah, they're trying to set me up. There was a shooting on the block and they're saying it was my car and a kid was hit and a girl and, you know, blah, blah, blah. So working that gang and that I got very close with the detectives there in that precinct and stuff. So, you know, I called them, they called me, one of the other, and they were like, yeah, it was him. You know, he did the shooting. And he said, well, he's telling me he's been set up. Of course he's telling me that, right? So anyway, so I went up to the scene and then talked to the detectives. Yeah, a kid was hit. It was a drive-by. He went by to shoot up the social club where they were hanging out. So at that point I knew now we've used him enough. And we've got enough, I think, and it's too dangerous to keep him out on the street as my informant because if he kills somebody, you know, I could be on the hook for that. Because,
I didn't know that part.
Well, I mean, look, the family will sue civilly in civil court. They'll sue the government, and they'll say, you knew this guy was out there. You knew he was a loose cannon. You knew this civil war was going on inside this gang, and then you let these guys. And then my son got killed in a drive-by that you could have prevented. You know, so we took him in. We brought him in one night to. You know, just as an interview. We didn't tell him we were going to arrest him. We interviewed him at length in the U.S. Attorney's Office. At the end of the interview, it was a hard, tough love kind of situation because we had worked with him for months. You know, we told him where it was at. And his biggest concern was now his one brother, the musician he wasn't worried about. The other brother, who was a real badass, was going to flip out because now one's in federal. I'm taking him into federal custody. The big brother's in state custody pending the murder charge. We're going to charge him, bring him over federally eventually. So his one brother's still out on the street. And I talked to the brother on the phone a couple of times with the brother that's now in my custody. Hey, turn himself in. We can protect you guys. We have witness protection. We can do all this stuff. And the brother in the street is like, yeah. Okay, I'll do it. But I need to do one more thing. I'm like, Fitzy, don't do it. You know, don't do this one more thing. Yeah. And a couple of appointments he missed. He said he would meet me here at some point, and he knew he's coming into jail. Mm-hmm. And so he wasn't showing up a couple of times. And then I get a call from one of the detectives one night, like 3 or 4 weeks into this attempt to get him in from the cold. And the detective said, we got your guy. He's here again. Went out. And he had parked himself outside a club where he knew the other gang members were partying and they were going to come out. He was going to shoot them all up. But they knew he was out there. They snuck behind his car and they blew his head off, basically. So I'm standing there. And he slumped over the wheel, and half his head is gone in the back.
Oh, they got the DJ.
No, they got the brother.
Oh, okay.
He did. They knew he was there, and they killed him before. They killed him before I could take him into custody.
Wow.
So I immediately went and got the other brother, the reggae musician guy, took him. He was charged with much lower crimes because he didn't do any violence, but he was involved with the drugs. And so now I have 3 brothers in custody, and then we just started moving towards the case. We ultimately, I think, indicted 54 gang members, big sweeps, big arrests, 300 cops and agents involved, and the SWAT team hitting the roofs, and it was a big deal. It was a lot of people said at the time that the film New Jack City was based.
I was wondering that.
Was loosely based on on that case. Yeah.
Really?
I mean, I'm not sure if it's true, but that's what people were saying.
Yeah.
Because that's
Nino
what it
Brown
reminded
case.
them of. Yeah, it reminded them of that. But it's funny because years later, these guys are still in witness protection, and they still call me once in a while.
Really?
Yeah, they don't have my number, but they can be patched through to a central key switchboard that can patch them through to my number. And,
Okay.
And the first time, I remember the first time I took a call from one of them, and my wife is sitting there, and she doesn't know what's happening. So, and she starts hearing me talking patois for the first time, and her jaw dropped. And then when I hung up the phone, she was like, "I don't even know who you are," because I'm like, "Hey, we'll go on, we'll go on." Like, and she's like, "What language was that?" I said, "That's just Jamaican patois. It's not a real language. It's a bastardized version of English. If you listen to it, if you listen to it long enough, you can understand what the words are. They're all English words that just really bastardized. They're all mushed and mingled together. It's not an official different language. It's just, but you can't understand it unless you do a lot of it."
Absolutely. Bobby, I think Mom's got one question.
Well, you mentioned your wife, and she didn't know who you were because she heard you speaking on the phone. How did you come to separate being home with your family and then maybe being recognized out on the street?
Oh, interesting.
You don't really separate it. You can't really separate it because you have to keep everybody safe. So, like, for years, my wife knew when we walked into a restaurant that I was going to sit at we're walking over to a table. She knows what seat I'm going to take. I'm going to take the seat with my back to the wall or facing the front door of the place. She knows, she knows I'm never going to sit with my back towards the crowd.
Yeah.
She that's just instinctive for her. We don't even talk about it. She knows she'll take that seat, and she knows where I'm going to take it. It's almost an instinctual thing because, you're always protecting. Like, I sleep with a gun by my nightstand. Last night I heard a noise in my yard. I got my flashlight, I got my gun, I walked out in the backyard. It was probably a coyote going through or something. But you're always on guard, Like, these guys, they're all still in jail. Some of them, they did 30, 35 years for RICO. And some of them got life with no parole. Some of them are probably getting out, and hopefully, supposedly, in the old days, I was comfortable with, even if they did 30 years in federal prison, the rule was they would automatically be deported once they got out of jail.
Okay.
In recent years, that changed because the immigration laws weren't being enforced that way. And so these guys were illegals. They were here illegally. They committed murder and violent crimes. And then they would serve, their sentence here, even 25, 30 years, and be let out on the streets of the U.S.
Oh, wow.
And so for somebody like me, that was more concerning because
exactly.
They used to be transferred from state custody or from federal custody right to immigration, and then they would be deported, and they would be, forcibly deported. That wasn't happening. And so, there's a lot of people out there that have spent a lot of time in jail, because of me. Because of my cases, and I always testified. All my cases, I was the first witness and the last witness usually. I would testify, and they would know me, and I'd sit at the government table the whole trial. So you really don't separate. You shouldn't separate it because if you keep your family in the dark, then they're at risk.
Yeah,
and they don't know they're at risk. You can't prevent them from being at risk, but you can minimize the risk to them by taking the proper precautions, right? And letting them know what to do and how to act, and my, wife, you have those conversations. If we're sitting here and I say, do this, just do it.
Yeah.
Don't ask questions. Don't be the wife that says, wait a minute, what's going on? Why am I here? Like, no. Like, if I tell you something, that means time is of the essence. And there's no time for discussion. Yeah. And I know women like to talk. It's like, but this ain't the time to talk.
Yeah.
If my eyes go big and I tell you duck to your right, you better duck to your right without question.
Yeah.
Because something's real about to happen. It's not the time to turn around and start asking me why and all that stuff. So keeping your family in the dark is not always the best.
Well, did they ever come? Oh, excuse me, not to cut you off there because I have to laugh because we do ask questions just to make sure Whatever you
especially when
do,
you're being told to do
okay,
something.
well,
Yeah.
did you ever feel that you needed to be put, your family needed to go to it? And I don't know anything about how this whole situation, except for what I see on TV. So first of all, the first part of it is, did you ever feel that you need to go to some kind of safe house, or they need to give you a different identity or something like that, that you felt that was necessary? That's the first part.
No.
Okay. That answers that part. The second part is this, and it was dealing with sleeping at night and knowing your family is there, and you're sleeping at night and you got a gun by you. How can you get a good night's sleep with all of this happening in your brain? How do you separate that out of your brain to get a good night's sleep, if you have ever gotten a good night's sleep?
Yeah, no, you learn to work on less sleep than most people, and probably less REM sleep, less deep sleep than most people. And my wife used to tell stories about, like, my pager would go off at 3 a.m, and I would have to, jump into my vest and grab my gun and run out the door. And she couldn't go back to sleep then because she doesn't know, where I'm going, and I can't tell her. But back to your first question. When I say no, I mean no. I will say there was an instance where a friend of mine in Miami, an agent in Miami, who I work joint cases, because these Jamaicans all, like, if they do a murder in Brooklyn, sometimes they run to Miami and work under the gang down there, knowing the locals, they kind of disappear that way, and vice versa. So I worked with some of the agents in Miami who worked Jamaicans as well, because there was a lot of interplay between the two. And an agent in Miami called me one day and he said, "Hey, I have to tell you this story. It's kind of funny. I just got out of just came from the jail. I interviewed this Jamaican guy in there, and we had this wide ranging interview. And he told me this story at the end. He says, like, oh yeah, a couple of years ago, we had this guy, this agent in New York, who was looking for the boss. So what happened was, there was a guy in Miami who committed a murder, came back to New York. And then the guys in Miami called us and said, we know he's in New York. We know we're watching his girlfriend, and she's dialing this number, and it comes back to a New York number. And so we go out there and look, and it got to the point where they go, we need this guy off the street. So me and my partner, who was a detective, an NYPD detective, we kind of went a little heavy on it. So I had business cards, and we would go into their smoke shops in Brooklyn and the Bronx, in this particular case. And, we'd walk behind the counter. I'd take their little cigar box, and they had all their weed in there. I'd dump it out onto the floor, and we just got a little strong arm with them a little bit, because we needed this guy off the street, because he was a murderer, and he had killed some people in Miami who were innocent people, and he was a real dangerous guy. They needed to get him up. So we really kind of did a hard press on him. I put my business card down. I said, I know he comes in here. We're watching you. We're watching your place. You're not going to sell another joint until this guy's off the street. And we really kind of put the pressure on him. And I spread my business card around and stuff. And, so word got around. Ultimately, I found out he had gone to Montreal, I think, after that, because the pressure was too much. But from this, 2 years later, I get this call, and the guy says, yeah, I had to tell you the story because, like, I knew it was bullshit, but, like, they said some FBI agent was really, running around looking for this guy, and the guy got all pissed off, and and they found out where he lived, and they put a team on his house, and they were watching his wife and kids, and the wife taking the kids to school. Like, I was single at the time. I didn't have kids. I still don't have kids. Okay. So I'm and he's laughing. He goes, yeah. I go, what year was this? He goes, 1991 or whatever. And I said, in 1991, I was living in a house with my brother, a 2-family house. My brother and wife and kids were living downstairs, and I was living upstairs in this little apartment. So they would see my sister-in-law taking the kids to school, thinking that was my wife and kids.
Wow.
You enter the same. It was just a 2-family, like a conversion. So you enter the same door in the front, and then you go upstairs. So they must have seen me go in that door. Must have seen her come out with the kids. And but I never knew. I never saw them there. I never knew they were there. And but this guy somehow, he described the house right and stuff. So I told the agent that. He goes, "Oh my God, you want me to go back?" I know, no, that guy's already arrested. It's long gone. I've since moved from there. I bought my own house and stuff, and but that was something I never knew. I never knew they were out there. I never saw them. I don't know how many times they actually did it or whatever, but I was always on guard when I left I lived on Long Island. It was just middle class suburbia. But you know, I would always be on guard, on lookout. I still kind of am, you know.
Mhm.
I mean,
Well,
if a guy in dreadlocks starts walking up to me,
Yeah.
it's game time, you know.
Yeah.
with that, with them watching your home and everything like that, where you were staying at the time, did you ever feel? First of all, you didn't think they were watching you, so you didn't have any clue of that. But how about watching and going in someone's house when they leave?
Wait,
What,
me doing that or them doing that?
huh? Excuse me. What do you remember anything like that happening?
Like someone came into my house?
Yeah, would have gone in your house without your knowledge.
Oh, no, no, no. I always have.
Oh, the
I always
dog
have.
is dog.
That's
Yeah.
a big. That's a. He's a
Your
Rottweiler
dog.
mix.
Yeah.
He's a
Okay.
Rottweiler mix, and the guy inside is a German Shepherd mix. So,
Oh
Oh,
yeah, you
so-
don't want. That's the wrong house to walk into.
yeah. So I've got two, and
It's
my
good.
wife always feels better when I travel because
Uh-huh.
you know these dogs, if they hear something outside the house, they make a lot
They
of noise.
wake, they
Yeah,
are
yeah, yeah.
alarmed. That's good. I just
Yeah.
had to ask that question because you said some people were out there watching your home, not
Yeah,
the
yeah.
home you're in, but when you were living with your brother.
Yeah.
Yes, yes,
and you
yeah,
didn't
yeah,
realize
yeah.
that was happening. Yeah.
No, no, it kind of shook me a little bit when I first heard about that. But I
Uh-huh.
always knew kind of. I've always been very cautious. My dad was a
Uh-huh.
cop, so you're raised under that. Like, I mean,
Oh,
it's kind of sad because it's like, you know, it's you're always living with the suspicion of people. You're always
Yeah.
thinking
Yeah.
the worst. You're always thinking the worst of people. You know, like
yeah.
you know, this
Well,
person's a threat to me or that person's a threat.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
the thought process is it's better for them. It's better for you to think of them as a threat and them not to be, than you
that's
not to think
correct.
of them as a threat and they are.
That's great.
Absolutely.
My mother always told us to be watchful and prayerful, and that's scripture too, because she always thought that we as kids were so innocent and we didn't expect anybody to do or suspect anybody to do any wrong to us. But she would always say, be watchful and prayerful. And when she went on to be with the Lord, I started saying that to my siblings because I started knowing exactly what she was trying to tell us. And so that was so
Right.
good. But
Bobby, question for you. I know. First off, I love that photo. Just I do because you're. I think you're badass. I love it, man. And hearing your story finally is awesome because I saw the photo back in the day when you're a good looking cat, man. The Italian dude with the jacket on, the MP5. That was you knocking him. Yeah, you're still good looking, Bobby.
Oh,
But,
thank you.
You were a sharp looking. You're still a sharp looking guy, but you're a good looking dude who is like. I mean, you look like an action star. You look like Colin Farrell kind of looks like you in his movies. But back then, that was when you were doing all those door-to-door knocking stuff, right?
yeah, because I think that picture I think you're referring to is there's a dreadlock guy in it, right? That's
Yeah,
Mikey
there's a
Dread.
dreadlock.
We call
Yeah.
him- Yeah, Mikey Dread. That was Mikey Dread. I know him. I still know him. But yeah, that was December 6th, 1990. That picture was taken. That was a big operation. We took down Mikey in his operation. But yeah, he was just just a weed dealer. I mean, it's really interesting now that I sit here in California where you can buy weed. I can
Yeah.
go down the street and buy weed myself. But Mikey's operation was like a professional. I mean, you know, we're talking $100 million a year. You know, you're talking about big money, and not that people kill over marijuana. People kill over money.
Yeah.
And if there's that much money being made in marijuana, people are going to be dying because
Understandable.
they're not dying because of the weed. They're dying because the money that was being made with the weed, and someone wants that money. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
someone's going to fight you for that money or try to rob that money from you. So it wasn't necessarily that, you know, of course, the crack epidemic, then the really violence exploded in the mid 80s. But even with weed, when weed was illegal, and that's why now that it's legal, there's much less violence surrounding it.
Okay.
It's not the weed. It was a commodity that made a lot of money. And where there's money, there's going to be violence because people are going to take it away from you, especially if it's like an illegal business where you can't put that money in bank, right?
Yeah.
You know, you can protect $100 million if you put it in the bank. But if you've got it in cash laying around, people are going to know, people are going to come around. It's a problem. And that's where violence happens. So like that was a big operation. Probably, I mean, I hate to say, he might not even be arrested today because, you know, well, first of all, he wouldn't be making that much money.
Yeah.
He would be, he might have a legal operation, you know, and making it legally. But yeah, that was I remember that. I have that picture around here somewhere, but yeah, I remember the picture you're talking about.
how did you get into the movie business? Because I think that's where you met my son. So you've
Right.
gone from law school, you completed your law degree, you got into FBI, you started doing all the FBI work. And then how did you decide you wanted to do movies or work in that industry? Or did someone
Yeah.
help you to do that? So tell us a little bit
Yeah.
about that.
So just to tie my career, so after I worked drugs for a number of years, and then I went into diving. I started.
Oh
the
yeah,
FBI's
Bobby, I
dive
want you to
team.
mention that too.
Yeah. So I created the underwater forensic program. So then I was the team leader for the New York dive team, which was the only team in the bureau at the time. And then I was tasked with building out the other three teams, which were in D.C., Miami, and L.A. And then later on, I came out and I ran the L.A. team for a number of years before I retired. So the second half of my career, I worked underwater. Actually, for most of my career, 19 years, I worked underwater. And I ran the FBI dive team. And we traveled around the world from 40 miles north of Anchorage, Alaska, cutting through a frozen lake, recovering a dismembered body of a serial killer's victim, to southern Iraq, where we were in a town called Yusufia, looking for an AK-47 used by 5 U.S. soldiers who raped and killed an Iraqi girl,
Really?
14-year-old girl, and killed her 5-year-old sister and mother and father. Yeah, so we were working that case with Army CID, and the bad guys were U.S. soldiers. And we were diving in 130-degree water, 130-degree temperature, air temperature. So we dove from frozen lakes in Alaska to the deserts of southern Iraq, and all around the world. And so that was another whole part of my career that that was interesting to me. My wife she was more at ease because I could hang up my bulletproof vest, and I was just diving. But the problem with that was when we were really kind of increasing the dive program and getting professionally trained by the lab and forensics and stuff. It was around the time the internet was exploding as well.
Okay.
And so we didn't know it at the time. As I was building out this program, and meeting with NOAA and the U.S. Navy and academic divers and commercial diving people and building out our program, we didn't know that a large part of it was going to end up being recovering children that were killed by predators, because the internet became a boom for child predators, and so we ended up recovering a lot of murdered children, or not a lot, but a number of murdered children. One is too many. Take it from me, one is too many. When you've held the body of one dead child underwater and brought him to the surface, that's one too many. And it was at a time in our lives where my wife and I were trying to have our own children, and we were eventually unsuccessful in that endeavor. And it was always, I remember standing on a dock in Toledo, Ohio, with a 19-year-old white trailer trash woman who had murdered her 18-month-old child, and she had 3 other children. And I had to get her out of jail at night because we weren't finding the kid where I thought he was, according to what she had told the police. So I said, I want to talk to her directly. Bring her here tonight. And so we got her under darkness. We got her out on that dock, and she's telling me how she, where she put the kid. And she had 3 other kids, and she's 19. She's a tweaker. And it was all because the boyfriend beat the kid to within an inch of his life, not the kid's father. It wasn't the kid's father. Yeah. It was her new boyfriend, and he had just gotten out of jail, and she didn't want him going back to jail for beating the kid. So she brought the kid down to the river and put him in the river. And so that's my day, in dealing with that kind of stuff. And then, at 10 o'clock at night, I go back to my hotel, and you call home, as we all did. And, at that point, that was happened to be one of the days that we found out that the latest attempt to get pregnant failed. And so my wife was, emotional about it, as you can imagine. And, she's telling me this, and I'm consoling her that. And I'm living with what I did all day, what I had to do all day, what I was facing. And then, we'll try again. Don't worry. We'll see another time, whatever. And then, then she's, and to get her to stop crying, she kind of composes herself. She goes, let's talk about something more pleasant. How was your day? And so
that's awful. I mean, it's just, I'm not laughing, Bobby, because it's funny.
No, I get it.
It's just a sad thing, because you don't want to tell her or share with her when you're in the midst of trying to have a kid. Then here, and you use the term tweaker, and I don't know what that
means. Like a drug addict. I think, right?
Yes, a meth head.
Yeah.
Meth head,
Yeah.
okay. And
Yeah.
she has destroyed her baby or killed her baby. And that's always kind of, I don't know how to explain that situation. But you just didn't feel comfortable to talk
Well,
about
the challenge is
your
I wasn't going to make her any more pain.
That's
Yeah.
correct. That's correct.
I slept that. I tried to go to sleep that night thinking,
Yes.
you know, my wife and I, two professional people, being denied the right to have our own child when
Yeah, that's a lot.
this woman has
Yeah.
four and she kills one of them, 18
Yeah.
years old innocent child, and it tests your faith. I'm a Catholic, and it certainly tests your faith
I bet.
in a God that can allow her to have another baby even after she killed that one,
Yeah.
and yet deny us the right to have
Yeah.
our own child. But you come to grips with that. But the long story short is, like, I worked all those years, gangs and drugs and the mafia, without getting injured. And then I started with the diving, and I dove for so many years under those conditions, and I was injured. And
Yeah.
it wasn't until I retired that I had to admit to myself that there are injuries that you can't see.
Yeah.
And I've dealt with that. And it's only been since I retired that I've dealt with that.
Yes.
And I never got physically injured in all the years I
Oh,
worked, but I do deal with injuries even today that I sustained in my work. But it's not something that we as a society pay a lot of attention to. We don't throw a lot of resources at it. So I've been on a crusade to kind of educate myself and avail myself to as many resources, as I can. But I do have my days where I struggle, and times where I struggle. There are triggers. I can't watch a movie where a child's injured or hurt, or that I know I'm not going to sleep. I have medicine that I take if I happen to accidentally see something like that I can take that's supposed to not give me a nightmare.
Yes.
But I've woken up. My wife has dealt with it. Me waking up screaming and covered in sweat and things like that, and it doesn't happen as much as it used to. Because I have certain tools that I've found, and therapists that I can talk to and stuff. But those are wounds that are never going to go away.
Yeah.
And it was just a part of my life. And there was a person that wrote a book called American Predator about the last serial killer case that I worked, and we recovered his last victim, and she was a 19-year-old girl. But the author of the book dedicated a chapter to us in the dive team and to me, and basically put it to some way like, I never had my own children, but all those children that I recovered and brought back to their parents, kind of, that was my role with children in my life. I have a bunch of great nieces and nephews, and nieces and nephews. Now I've recently learned that great nieces and nephews. I thought they were grandnieces. My sister became a grandmother, and then that kid is my great niece. It's her granddaughter, but it's my great niece, which I thought would be my grandniece, but it's my great niece.
One thing I wanted to say, Bobby, I want to say this, and we can go on to that movie part, is because you just mentioned that book, but I was saying how many people, how many children you have protected. I wrote that on before you told me about that book, I told the audience about the book, but look how many children you have protected. Look how many, the impact you've made in protecting others. And so that is what's been such a blessing in what you've done. And I wanted just to interject that, and you just happened to mention that book before, but I had written that note on my paper, giving you a chance to talk about that. But I said protection. I wrote that in a notebook, and I want you to know that. And I appreciate you so much for God's blessing you to be a part of that whole group that does that in this society.
Yeah. Thank you. So to move on to your actual original question. So
that's okay.
Yeah, so
you're good, Bobby. No, this is everything we want, man.
This is
your
exactly what we love.
You're wonderful, man.
This is excellent. This is exactly what we love.
So I retired in 2014.
Okay.
And my wife is a producer. She's a sports producer. So she does the Olympics. She's been the executive producer on 8 Olympic Games now. In fact, guy back there, she brought back from Sochi, Russia in 2014. So he's a Russian dog. He's a Rottweiler mix, but his name is Sasha. Because he's born in Russia. Yeah. At the 2014 Winter Olympics, he was a puppy and he was abandoned in the street. And then as soon as I retired in 2014, she was done with those Olympics, and we moved to Rio de Janeiro because she was the executive producer of sport presentation on the Summer Olympics in 2016. So from 2014 to the end of 2016, we lived in Rio de Janeiro with our dogs, and I wasn't working. I took the year off. I was walking my dogs along the beach. I do all the cooking in the house. So she would go to work. I'd walk the dogs. I'd go to the gym, and then I would come back and stop at the local market, get some fresh food or fresh vegetables and fish, and then I would have dinner ready when she got home. And I would walk the dogs along the beaches of Copacabana, Ipanema, Leme, Urca is with the neighborhood we lived in. But yeah, I could walk to Copacabana Beach from where we lived. And so it was really a good life. But about a year into that, I got an email on this retired agents chain. We all there's like this network of retired agents. And there was an email saying, hey, we're looking for somebody LA based. And so we had moved from LA. I retired in LA. LA office. I ran the LA dive team for the last couple of years. And then, but we always knew after the Olympics were done, we were going to go back to our home in LA. And then after that, whatever the next games were. So in 2015, this email went around and I actually I was home visiting or for a doctor's appointment or something, flying back to Rio. Oh no, my wife and I were, here's what it was. So we were back for the holidays and we were flying back from LA to Rio, our home in Rio. We actually had a couple of friends come down and watch our dogs, so they got a free vacation. We flew them down and they could stay at our place.
Oh, nice.
And we had a beautiful top floor penthouse on top of the building. You could see the Cristo statue, the famous Cristo statue.
With
yeah, you could see it from our balcony.
Oh, amazing.
And then and so they were watching our dogs, and we were coming through Atlanta and connecting to Rio from LA, and I saw this email. So on the flight down, we talked about it, and the email basically said, we're looking for an agent that's LA based for a new TV series about the FBI and blah, 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 blah. So I was like, well, yeah, but I can't do it because I'm not. And she goes, yeah, but it's you just try to do it, get your foot in the door. You could say we had friends in LA. We could stay with you could stay with friends. And so by the time we landed in Rio 11 hours later, I got right on and answered the email and said, hey, this is who I am. And so via email at that point, I met Tim and Jim Clemente.
Oh,
yeah. Jim, I had kind of known years before. We both worked in the New York office together, but we never really worked on the same stuff, but we knew of each other in the office. And he had then gone on to be a profiler, of course, and all that stuff. But Tim never worked in New York, so we never really crossed paths. He was a DC guy, and Tim mainly. So I respond to the email, and they say, yeah, come on. And so I flew literally. I think I was only back in Rio for a day, and then I got on a plane at my wife's urging and flew back to LA. I still remember at the first. I mean, I'm brand new. I don't know what I'm doing, and they're like, you got to go right to set. Like literally, first day. I'm like, I haven't met Tim yet. Tim's working on the show, so it's called a show called Criminal Minds Beyond Borders, and basically, it's the Criminal Minds show that everybody knows and loves. But our team, instead of going to Detroit one night, and Toledo the next episode, and Chicago the next episode, our team was going to Paris and Bangkok the next episode, and it was an international team. That's why it's called Beyond Borders. And Gary Sinise was our star. Alana De La Garza was our female lead, and then Daniel Henney, who's a very good friend of mine still. Of course, Gary is an honor too. And then Annie Funky was that was the team of four. And then I didn't work much with their version of Penelope. It was
the dark haired girl, right?
No, it was a guy. It was the guy from I Hate Chris. Remember the show I Hate Chris?
Oh yeah, I do hate Chris. Oh, was it black or white?
Black guy.
I don't know what that actor's name. He's on Abbott Elementary now. I think that's what you're talking about.
Oh, yeah, probably. He was the guy from My Hate Chris, which was like he was a kid then. Mm-hmm. So he was our computer whiz. But just like
Penelope.
Just like Penelope, she works in an office by herself. So all of her shots are usually like by herself.
Yeah.
So like I never really met him too much. But the four that I mentioned, I worked with. But the very, very first day, they go down to San Pedro. We're shooting on the water. And so I find the set, right? I've never even been on a set before too much. And then, I found my way there. I introduced myself. I found my way to the first AD because I was supposed to find this guy, the first AD. And I find the first AD. And, at that point, I probably didn't even know what a first AD was.
Yeah.
And so I find the first AD and he tells me, okay, this is the shot we're blocking right now. And it was like Gary Sinise is running down this pier, and he tackles this guy into this boat. It's supposed to be Bangkok, and one of these big, festive boats, and they tackle and they go a big wrestling match and stuff. And And so I go, okay. So then he hands me the script. I read the action lines and stuff and some of the dialogue. You know, I got the sides. I didn't know what sides were. I knew what sides were. So this is all a huge learn. I'm drinking out of a fire hose at this point.
Yeah,
like,
seriously.
You know,
you're learning
and Tim's,
on the job.
You know, and I haven't even met Tim yet. And Tim Clemente is one of my buddies now, mentor. You know, in his email, he says, just learn what everybody does on their set. We're very respectful of everybody and learn as much as you can about it. And so, like, here I am. So I go down and I look at it, and first AD's walking with me, and he's, what do you think? And I give him some thoughts and stuff. And he's like, oh, that's good. That's great. This and that and stuff. He goes, okay, come on and talk to Gary. Now, like, I'm face to face with Gary Sinise.
Yeah.
Right.
Lieutenant Dan.
Nominated actor. And I'm like, yeah. And then so it's like, it was pretty shocking to be thrown into the first, you know, this is an action scene with a stunt coordinator. Oh my God. He better not watch this because I love him. And I can't remember his name. I can see his face. Older guy. He was our stunt coordinator. He was fantastic. Still a very good friend of mine. And he lives down in Orange County. Yeah, so he's like, okay, this and that. And he was a super guy. Yeah, so I started working with that, and I learned the business, and then, you know, I'm on set, and I just kind of fell in love with it, with the creative process, you know, and worked for 2 years on that show doing that. You know, not, you know, we you know, as you know, Brandon, we shoot on an 8-day cycle, so it's 8 days, 8 business days. Normally, you don't work Saturday, Sundays, so 8 business days per episode of a TV series on a network television show, and so I was probably used in, you know, maybe four days of an 8-day shoot. They don't always have so I was always only used where they had the guns out, we're making an arrest, some action scene or something like that. If it's just like, you know, if it's just a round table scene or the jet scene, you know, like they don't need me for that stuff. You know, those are just, you know, so I would work probably on any given day, 3 to 4 days of an 8-day shoot, sometimes 5, if it was a more action oriented episode.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, Bobby,
and then some days
you're technical advisor too. Sorry, Mom. He's a
writer
so and a technical advisor too.
Right. So this was the technical advice. This was before I even started writing. So when Jim and Tim hired, when I finally met Tim, probably a week later, I was probably on the set 3 or 4 times before I met Tim in the office, because Tim was a writer on the show at that point.
Okay.
Jim, his brother, was writing on what we call the mothership, the regular Criminal Minds, and the one, you know, and then I was on the spinoff, and then Tim was a writer on the spinoff show, the Beyond Borders show. So I meet Tim, and then I meet Jim, and they're basically like, look, tech advising is fun, it's cool, stuff, but where you want to be is writing. You want to be writing. You want to, if you're not acting, you want to be writing. But tech advising, we see this as a stepping stone for you to writing, because you know it's just not it's kind of a dead end after a while. So you want to write, you want to create your content and create control the process and control what's being said. And so I totally agreed with that. And so I took that, I worked that 2 years with the concept of learning everything that everybody does on the set, and then learning what the writers do and how the writers interact and with the cast and with the director and everything. And so unfortunately that series went off the air after 2 years. So but at that time, Jim Clemente, who was the brother now working, he's been a long time writer on the Mothership, on the regular Criminal Minds show, invited me to the writer's room on the main show to be a story consultant in the writer's room. So I started working in the writer's room. Now I'm not on set every day. I'm in the writer's room every day, working with writers. And that really is where I kind of fell in love with the process. And it was a great group of writers. Some of them really experienced, some of them more new, but they were all like so generous with their time. I would ask a lot of questions. They had a lot of questions of me as well. But yeah, it was really where I wanted to be, and still I want to be in a writer's room. I mean, I am writing a feature film. That's a completely different process than breaking story with 6, 8, 10 other writers in a writer's room, where you kind of all get to kind of throw your stuff against the wall and everybody kind of contributes. And that's really a creative energy that I kind of missed since the last show I worked was pre-COVID. I wrote on the Nicole Kidman series pre-COVID.
Oh, Lioness?
No. Action never got made. It was called Crime Farm for HBO Max. And Janine Sherman Bavois. I don't know if you know Janine.
Oh, yeah, I know Janine. Yeah, Janine's
a great showrunner, fantastically smart woman, very so creative. She created Claws. She did The Big Cigar. which was a series recently she did.
I did Claws too.
Oh, you did Claws, really?
Yeah,
Janine was the showrunner on that.
Yeah, Janine hired that too. Yeah.
Yeah, Janine, she's fantastic. She was a writer on Criminal Minds previously, and then that's how Jim introduced me to her. And so that's how I got my WGA card.
Okay, nice.
I got into the Writers Guild on that show on Crime Farm. I wrote an episode with Jim of Criminal Minds.
The one I was in.
The one you were in, yeah. Well, that you reprised the role, right? You were.
Oh yeah,
that was a role you had played before, yeah. With Tony Dennison. Yeah. And that was a role he had played before.
Yeah.
From a sergeant to a captain or a chief, I think. Yeah. Everybody got promoted.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's so interesting? I want to say one quick thing here. Now you're in a union. So
now I'm in a union. Yeah.
The union.
I'm in two unions now because I got into
union ass.
I got into
What's
SAG.
One, Bobby?
SAG. I'm in SAG.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, have you acted in something too?
Yeah. Well, in Criminal Minds, one day on set they were looking for something and they were short or something, so they got me in I played a Russian cop. It was Beyond Borders and Beyond Borders.
Okay.
So it was me leading the team. So Gary is right behind me, and Lana and Daniel and Annie. So I lead them to a house because it's supposed to be in Russia. So and then I'm leading them, and so I'm acting. Of course I get yelled at for looking at the camera. And do all those stupid things you do when you just start out. And you hear cut. Bobby, you looked right in the camera that time.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I'm so embarrassed. So and then better than that, then at some point I get ahead of them down in the back or something, and then it blows up, so I get to do a stunt, and I get to be set on fire.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So they put all that goop on me and stuff, and then three of us got blown up. The son of the stunt coordinator, both his sons are stuntmen, and so they blew me up, and then I got to get on fire, be set on fire, and stuff. So I got my SAG card doing that.
Okay.
Yeah. So now you're Taft-Hardy then. Is that
you got
Taft-Hardy? Like Brandon.
Yeah.
I know some of the language. So you're Taft-Hardy.
That's exactly right. Taft-Hardy. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yep.
Mama Rush learned a few things with this writing, acting, and all of these things that you want to do.
So you get it after, right? So I wasn't, and then you get it after.
Yeah.
And then so funny because the night I was doing that, they were dressing me up. And they were looking for the opportunity to do that for me because they knew I wanted to do that.
Yeah, they like you too. Yeah.
Yeah, but the problem was the very night the union's not always on set, and the very night they're there, the union person's on set.
Oh.
And so they're like, oh my God, we can't dress you out because you're not in union. And so like they had this plan where they had the union person kind of like sequester. He's over there. Let's go over here. Like they had to move up, give him over to Crafty. Let him, put some new stuff on Crafty. And so they kind of distracted the union person. And then they got me in the scene, and then I got Taft-Hardy.
Awesome. From your background, you knew why they had to do what they had to do.
Oh yeah, I knew Taft-Hardy from working at the National Relations.
That part is so.
That's awesome.
That's something. Well, in your experience now with all of the shows you're doing and writing for, your background is really playing a major part. In fact, I love watching crime shows now. I mean, it's a whole platform for it now. And it's something interesting about those based on true stories that I really find so interesting in watching. And so what you do now in writing, I guess that's a free flow for your mind now.
Yeah, it really is. It's like, I mean, I could probably have lunch with a showrunner and give them episode ideas for an entire season.
Oh, wow.
Just over lunch. I mean, like, it's just, spending 30 years doing it, you become a repository of all these different things that happen in real life. And then, Jim always said, like, almost every episode of Criminal Minds, and we did 325 on CBS before it moved over to Paramount Plus. Every one of those was based on a true story or taken from a true story. And we actually proposed a series called Real Criminal, something. I think it was going to be Jim and Joe Mantegna, basically an unscripted series, and they would show an episode of Criminal Minds, and then Jim would talk you through the actual case that it was based on.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so I don't know. It never got made, but it was going to be a really good series. Joe was on board, and I saw Joe recently out here. He's a great guy. I still keep in touch with him and Gary and Daniel because he's a big golfer. Daniel Henney's a big golfer, and I run a golf course. So he's going to come out here and play golf and stay with us and stuff. Because he's on the Wheel of Time now. He's been
I didn't know that he switched.
Yeah, at Amazon, he's the male lead with Rosamund Pike on the Wheel of Time, which is one of those Game of Thrones type. You know, they shoot it in Prague, and outside of Prague, they have a village they bought and turned it into a set. But yeah, he's been on. They're in season 3 or 4. But yeah, so I'm writing 2 films now.
Yeah, let's hear about those, Bobby.
And I wrote a pilot. I finished one pilot. I'm working on a second pilot. And they're all based on true stories. FBI. One of my feature films is based on that terrible case that I told you about the 14-year-old Iraqi girl that was raped and killed by 5 US soldiers. Actually, Brian De Palma made a movie about that case.
Oh, is that the Michael J. Fox one?
No. It's that I know that's a Vietnam one.
Sorry.
That's called I know that one with Sean Penn and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
No, this one came out in 2008. It was by Brian De Palma, and it was called Redacted.
Okay.
It was a limited release because you imagine 2008, the surge in Iraq was 2007. So, and that's the challenge I'm finding now with my feature is that I'm not writing an anti-military movie.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the crime itself was 5 US soldiers doing this horrific crime. My feature is about the 15 FBI agents who dropped everything to go into the middle of a war zone to pursue justice for a 14-year-old Iraqi girl. And that's a pretty unique story.
It is.
We go into a lot of dangerous situations, but I can't remember ever going into an active war zone. We weren't in the green zone. We were in an area called the Triangle of Death. And they had to bring in a force protection unit for the Philippines, special operators, to kind of surround us and keep us safe while we were diving, because they didn't, the crime was happened by soldiers in theater, and the military didn't know who was involved and how far it went. And so the Secretary of Defense actually was negotiating with the FBI director at the time, Robert Mueller, to put our team together and to get it over there. And so there was a lot of negotiations how we were going to get over there, how we were going to be kept safe and stuff. Because we're investigating our own soldiers, so you don't know who to trust and who not to trust.
Seriously.
So I'm trying to keep the actual crime as a C story as the background, and more about this group of men who kind of decided, we've sworn to pursue justice wherever that may be. Well, I'm not sure that it's ever actually involved going into an active war zone to pursue justice.
Seriously.
So that's kind of the story I'm trying to tell. And we did have some really good military people with us. First of all, the people that kept us safe, and then the CID investigators. The Army has a criminal investigative division. Because of the 5 soldiers, by the time we got to the point of arrest, of investigation, 2 of them had been dishonorably discharged. So they were civilians. So the CID guys only go after active military. So the FBI was handling the 2 that were now civilians, dishonorably discharged for other things, and then the military was court-martialing 3. So 2 went to federal trial, and the 3. So our Louisville, Kentucky office was working hand in hand with the Army CID investigators from Fort Campbell, Kentucky, who were kind of investigating the crime, which took place in southern Iraq. So it's kind of the Redacted movie shows the whole up until the crime, and kind of the movie ends. Brian De Palma didn't even know about our diving. It was kind of kept a little
really okay.
We didn't kind of make that very well known. So my thing is probably going to start after the crime has already occurred. I don't want to show the crime, whatever. You may see some flashbacks or whatever, but so that's what that movie's about. It's about what we went through to get there. Like I remember, I brought my wife to her favorite Japanese restaurant the night before I had to leave, and I had to tell her, like, hey, I have to go away tomorrow. I can't tell you where I'm going. I can't tell you how long I'm going to be gone. I can't tell you when the next time I'm going to be able to pick up a phone and call you. I just can't. I don't know those. Some of that stuff I don't know. Other I know, and I can't tell you. But I had been to Iraq the year before. This was 2006. I had been to Iraq in 2005. Another mission. So when she saw me packing my desert stuff, she knew I wasn't going anywhere cold. And so she could put 2 and 2 together when because if I was going somewhere non-threatening, I wouldn't be packing my military grade gear and stuff. But I still couldn't tell her, and so she, I remember like part of it was like, oh, so you're going to Vegas with the boys and you're going to hang out for a week, and then you're going to call, and then that stuff's never going to come out of your bag. And I'm like, well, that could happen, but it's
Yeah.
not. That's not, you know. But she's like, but I have to have blind trust and faith in you, right? I said, yeah, that's the deal. I can't. There's no way I can prove to you, you know, until I get back. Maybe.
Bobby, one question to ask you real quick. What were you diving for? I think you mentioned it before. Were you diving for AK-47, you said?
Yeah. So how they did it was they had an Army issued shotgun. They took the family, you know, at basically at gunpoint with an Army shotgun. The mother, father, and 5-year-old was sequestered in the one bedroom in the house, and then they were attacking the girl, the 14-year-old, in the outer room. And the father, hearing her screams, couldn't take it anymore. He ran to his closet to get his AK, leveled it and the guy was guarding him, shot him once with the Army issued shotgun. And then, knowing enough, he didn't want to shoot his shotgun too much because that's Army issued. He went over, picked up the father's AK, killed the wife and 5-year-old, and then went out and killed the 14-year-old with the AK. And so yeah, so the Army got the Army issued shotgun, obviously.
Okay.
But you know, with a shotgun with a smooth bore barrel, there are really no lands and grooves. There's no real forensics, ballistics on that. So, but we would die. But they were assigned to a checkpoint over a small bridge, and they would have razor wire on both sides of the bridge, and the razor wire would get bombed. They would fall in the river, and then they do it again and bombed again. And so the river was this huge bird's nest of razor wire. And then when they took the gun with them, the AK, and they threw it in the river right outside their checkpoint.
Yeah.
So we were like right at their checkpoint. Now that company of soldiers had already been rotated back to Kentucky. So none of the soldiers that were at that checkpoint, because we would be inserted in the middle of the night. We couldn't go in during the day because it was too hot to zone.
Oh, wow.
So we would be inserted on helicopters, on Blackhawks, into a nearby field, and we would run to the checkpoint, which was like a compound, a walled-in compound, small.
Okay.
And we would run there, and then by daylight, then we could start diving with our force protection unit surrounding us. But it was 130 degrees. And then before daylight ended, we'd have to get back into the compound. And then we weren't told when we were going to be picked up. We just had to be ready from sundown to sunup. They had to come in under darkness with the Blackhawks to pick us up again because we weren't living out there.
Yeah.
Our gear came on Humvees because we had a lot of gear, and that came on in a Humvee caravan. So we would wait. And for OPSEC reasons, they wouldn't tell you when they were coming in.
Okay.
Operational security. And so they would say, okay, you're going to get 10 minutes notice. Just be sitting on your bag ready to go. And then we'd run out, and then pitch black field, and then you'd have, it's changed. Right. The LZ has changed. And then we'd have to run somewhere else and be picked up and stuff. So that was, that's what I'm still working with that.
Bobby, it sounds, I mean, are you writing a movie? You want it to be a movie, or do you want it to be like a mini-series, episode, and to do it? So how are you trying to craft that in your mind? So
right now I'm approaching it as a feature, as a film.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But it's very possible and likely, or I don't know if it's likely, but it's very possible it could end up as a series. It all depends on how much. It all depends on someone buying it and then them turning it into something. We've all seen movies that could have been series, and
absolutely.
But we've also seen series that could have been condensed into a movie.
Yeah.
This is too much detail, too much side, tangential storylines that really aren't germane to the main storyline that take away from it. Especially some of these longer running series, they have these episodes that have, these kind of, I don't know what filler. You call them, but they're filler. They have nothing to do. They're like a background on one character, and it's an entire episode. My wife and I were like, well, that was a waste of our time. That had nothing to do with the show. We just followed that guy. We know a little bit more about his back history now. But and so literally you have to find things. So there are a whole series like that. Like I've seen 6 or 8 episode series that could have been condensed into a movie. Well, it all depends on as the process goes along. How much I, and if somebody else might see it as a feature and then go, hey, we should make this a series. That's
oh wow. Oh, the reason I said I love crime stories, it's not the crime itself, but the process used to solve the crime. How you start to put detail together, little things together to eventually come to solving. And sometimes it might take a period of time to solve that, but you put it so together. And I think that's where as a scientist, I am a scientist. I love how we have to in our whole scope of things, have to look at different little pieces of it until we finally put the whole piece together.
Sure.
And here it is. It's ready to
Yeah.
go. And that's what I love about crime stories, the way you write them, the way you figure things out, and the little details that you put together and eventually come. And that's why I'm so fascinated with that the whole thing you do.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, the scientific method is very analogous to the methodology that we use to solve crime, right? There is a science to it. You know, now more than ever, it seems like when we're using science more and more now, like with familial DNA and genetic genealogy. You know,
I always knew DNA would be the answer. I knew that when I was in schooling at my university. I always said once they figure this piece out, they'll be able to clear so many things. And people, I just love how the DNA now you have the scientists have come up with so many things and processes now that you can easily match that and either solve a crime or clear people who have been convicted of crimes.
And it's always getting better. It's actually that science is ever improving.
With that.
And they have actually a thing called the MVAC now. It's a vacuum machine. It's called the MVAC, which now you can actually subject a piece of evidence that traditionally we thought could not contain DNA, or you couldn't extract the DNA from this because of the material that it's made of. This MVAC system now can actually get DNA from things previously thought not to be able to. Don't even collect that at the crime scene because the scientists tell us we can't get DNA off that. They didn't have the method to get it. Now this method has been created. Just 2016, I think, or 2015 is when the MVAC got that technology. So technology is ever evolving, and it's just getting better and better.
And I love that you all have saved evidence. They've saved evidence in rooms and go back and find, like you said, in order to do that procedure or whatever that is. I'm not too familiar with that.
Bobby, what was your second? Sorry,
yeah. What's your second?
What was your second series? You mentioned there's two projects, right?
You're working on.
You have
I'm doing another feature, but I've written one pilot, and so I've got basically 4 and a memoir, which would be 5. But I've got a pilot for TV series, which I see it as a network procedural, and then I've got another one that's in the process. That one's finished; it's complete. I'm shopping it around, and then the other one I'm still working on. And they're both kind of procedurals. And they're both obviously, I know. There are people in the Dick Wolf world who think, they've covered everything the FBI has to cover, but really, there's a couple of things that they haven't, and that I think are unique, and I think are quite interesting, and I think they could work. It's just a matter of getting somebody to kind of pay attention.
My final question is this, and I'm thinking about young people and our audience that we have at the Buckle Up podcast. This is mine, not yours, but what advice would you give young people if they wanted to consider going into being either with the FBI or being lawyers or being whatever? What would you tell them, or going into the service or something? What would you convey to them about what you've done in your life and what will help them make decisions?
Everybody's different. And so I would tell them to find their passion, find what they're passionate about. Forget about making money. Forget about what's going to make me rich. Find out what's going to make you happy. The old, what is that old saying? Do a job you love and you never work a day in your life. You know what I mean? So it's that kind of concept. It's find what motivates you, because the worst thing you can do is work at a job that you really have to drag yourself out of bed to get to every morning. I never did that with the FBI. In 27 years in the FBI and the other 3 years I worked in the government, I jumped out of bed most mornings and I ran to work. I couldn't wait to get to work. And there were times when I was working late and I didn't even realize how late it was, because either my wife was traveling, we had no kids, we didn't have dogs at the time, so I just worked an extra 3 hours. I didn't even realize, because I was so engrossed in what I was doing, because I enjoyed it. So find something you're passionate about and you enjoy it, and then find a way to make a living at it. And like I said, it doesn't have to make you rich, but you will be happier in the long run if you look back at your life and you say, wow, I am really satisfied and happy with what I did and these things I've accomplished. And rather than saying, wow, I'm really happy with the amount of money I have in the bank. I think, I've lost my dad, I've lost my brother. When I look back, the things that they were most happy about in their lives are the things that they did that brought them joy, not that made them money. And it was almost never that. And so find something that it doesn't have to be crime fighting. It doesn't have to be whatever. If you're an artist, if you're, whatever stokes your passion, and you just look inside yourself, and sometimes it's hard to find. And sometimes you do something for a few years and you realize that ain't it. And don't be afraid to switch. But always move towards joy. Always move towards your passion in your life. I found a second outlet now. I loved what I was doing for 30 years, and now I love what I'm doing now. And so it's always about enjoying what you're doing, because life is really short. And you can look back and say, I made all this money, but I really didn't have a good time. And then you're going to have this really short window of time when you're older to spend it and have a good time. It's too late. That time is lost. So find something you're passionate about, whatever that is for you. Again, that's because everybody's different. Whatever, makes you happy, whatever. Just imagine yourself getting out of bed and going with your alarm clock going off and going, and jumping out of bed and going to do that thing. Find that thing and do it, and find a way to make a living at it. I think today, the benefit that the young people have is that there are so many more ways to do that these days.
Yeah.
Yes, that's so true.
Used to be, when I was growing up, it was a 9-to-5 job. Looked for 9, and most of my friends became insurance adjusters or did something just because that was a way to, make a living, earn a paycheck, get a house and a family, and that's what you're supposed to do. But nowadays, it seems like there's many more ways to pursue your passions nowadays. I think, and technology is behind that, of course. And so I think that would be my biggest advice. Find what drives you, what's going to get you out of bed in the morning, and run to it and do that.
Great advice. What great advice. I appreciate that
Bobby,
so much.
Bobby, you knocked this out of the park today.
You really have.
Thank you.
I don't, because that was so great, I don't want to throw you into something else, and I know you got to go here soon, but I wanted to ask you one quick question, and then Bobby, we'd have you back, would be amazing, but you've done phenomenal.
Sure, absolutely.
Yes, yeah.
My thing was this, Bobby, you mentioned, because I want to look it up after this, you mentioned about some kind of serial killer in Alaska?
Israel Keys.
Israel Keys is his name?
Israel Keys was his name, yeah. And the book is called, I have it up here, American Predator is the book that was written about him. But there's been many, I've been on about 3 or 4 documentaries about that case, about him. There's one on Oxygen. You can look them up on YouTube. The thing about Keys is so the bad part about it is he told us about 11 homicides that he had done. We think he did more than that, but he hung himself in jail before we could get all the information.
Oh, wow.
But what that did was it allowed the FBI then to release all his interrogation tapes. So literally you can go on YouTube and you can watch his interrogation tapes and watch this guy. My wife can't view him because he's so creepy. And it's one of those rare glimpses where you can actually see the mind of a serial killer, see him laughing and joking and things like that. And, I had to watch some of them for preparation for some of the docs, and my wife would be in the back. I don't know how they can do that. How you can sit in a room with him. I never was part of the interrogation team. My job was to find his last victim, Samantha Koenig. And we did find her, and we brought Samantha home for her family. He had dismembered her and sunk her under a frozen lake. But he had killed people on the East Coast. He had killed people, in the South. He was, so Israel Keys, there'll probably be a movie about that book, American Predator.
Okay.
I'm sure there'll be a feature film or a series about it. But he was very successful, very smart, chilling guy. He's the most successful serial killer you've never heard of, kind of. That's what the moniker on him, because he really didn't get a whole lot of notoriety. He was arrested in 2011 and killed himself in 2011 or 2012. So Israel Keys, he was a brutal guy. And it's chilling when you go on YouTube and you watch his video, because, it's one of the rare times you can actually see him talking. And he actually wanted the death penalty. He was asking for the death penalty. He actually said, "How quick can you get it for me? How quick can you put me to death?" He actually did not want to go to jail. He did not want to stay in jail. He was like a caged animal. And he said, "I want the death penalty." And, the investigators did a very shrewd way of like, we have no power over that. We have no power over giving you the death penalty. But they kind of, if you watch the series of interrogation, now they The only part they edited out of the interrogation tapes is some of the more gruesome parts of the descriptions of his crimes, but the rest of it's there. It's still as chilling. And they play this cat and mouse game with him where you can see the psychopath not, playing this, he's in charge and he's in control, and how they let him think that just so they can get the information from him.
Okay. Well, Bobby, you've been absolutely phenomenal today, man. Bobby, I can't thank you enough for your time, for your service. And you dropped so many different gems here. And I want to make sure you plugged everything you need. I want to make sure that you also got, if there's anything out there that we can watch with you.
Yeah, no. When I have my book and when I have a movie out or something, I'll come back on.
Yeah, please do, Bobby, anytime.
Yeah.
Bobby, we will have questions that come up, but you are such a fascinating person. You have such a wealth of information that you have imparted to us today and our audience. And I want to thank you for that, because this difference you're making to the Buckle Up podcast, we appreciate so much. But the difference you continue to make in society and this world, we are so appreciative for that. Okay. So
thank you very much. I really appreciate that.
And I want to also tell you, I love your animal, your dog. Your dog became a part of your scene.
Yeah.
You didn't know. No,
he was on the bed.
He became a part of the scene, and I love animals. I love dogs especially. And he was up on the bed and just so nice. I mean, such a well-behaved.
Oh, you saw him back there?
Yeah. Oh, he was on the bed. And we do have a part where we talk about animals on the show and people's favorite furry animals. And he walked from the bed. I wanted to let you know, in the background, we had a beautiful show from him. And then from that, he went from the bed, didn't tear the bed up, went straight and got on the floor. And I tell you the truth, that was entertaining as well, just in case you didn't know what was going on. So
these guys are my life.
We appreciate how you turned your room around and this view and everything. So thank you so much for everything, Bobby.
And we Bobby, hopefully we'll be able to catch up. Well, whenever you're in LA, hopefully we'll be able to catch up with you there. Yeah. And then that's it, Bobby. You're welcome here anytime. Anytime you need to plug in your books, shows, anything you want to talk about, we'd love to have you.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, absolutely,
so
Bobby.
You always what we do in the end.
Thanks, Bobby.
Thank you. Thank you.
Did you have to ask us? I mean, did you need to ask us anything?
Yeah, thanks, Bobby.
I mean, we're just getting off the line here and clapping for you, but anything?
No, I don't think so. I mean, no, people can find me on social media if they want. But
Bobby, mention your what is your? I know your handle, but you might want to mention it too for the
Bobby Chacón FBI. Usually, it's just BOBBYCHACON FBI. Usually and I'm on all the social media. I'm not very good at it, but I'm on. My two dogs have their own Instagram page, so I do that with them.
Okay, if you know theirs by heart, I'll take that. But otherwise, I'll get
Sasha. It's Sasha _and Jagger and _ Jagger. So Sasha and Jagger are my two dogs.
Okay.
You search for them. Search for Sasha and Jagger. You'll find them.
Sounds good.
Because my wife travels so much, I'm with the dogs. Me and these dogs are like inseparable, and sometimes I go days without seeing another human being. It's just me and these two. So,
that sounds good. Well, Bobby, I'll have this back to you in a couple of hours.
Awesome.
And then let me know what photo you want to use for your profile. If you can email, if you can text me or email me, I'll put it for your profile.
Yeah, I just got some new headshots. I can give you that, or I can give you the one from Mikey Dread.
Whatever you want, Bobby.
Okay.
All right, man. Thank you, brother.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful day, Bobby.
Thanks. You too.
Bye-bye.
That's awesome.
Awesome. Outstanding.